Hello, and welcome back to part two-ish of my saya making for the sword that I recently got, the sword that I most recently got. So, in the previous steps, I think I showed the scabbard almost complete or almost together. The saya, the scabbard, almost complete, almost together. And in this video, I could show and describe more steps and how and why it went together the way it's going. So here it is so far, and you can see it, straight. It's looking better, not perfect, but better. And I'll describe, let me move the camera a little closer, and I'll describe the steps that I did and why it's got to be like that, or I think it should be like that. So the first thing I'll tell you about is the urushi. This is the third coat so far of urushi. And if you're wondering, what is urushi? You might already know by now, but it's a traditional Japanese lacquer. And, it's not just Japanese. I think other Asian countries use this lacquer. It's made from the relative of poison ivy. Poison ivy, sumac, one of those. So the thing is, it can cause an external and internal allergic reaction. For some people, they breathe it in. It gets into the sinuses, and it really messes with things. Or if it gets on their skin, the oil from the paint can cause a poison ivy-like allergic reaction. Unfortunately, I think the only way to know that is to know if you're susceptible to poison ivy, having a reaction to poison ivy, or if you start painting and find out the hard way. I'm not really very sensitive to it. Lucky me. So I guess, but I do try to really get any paint that's on my hands off right away. You can't handle this paint. It's not like school paint where you can be like, let's finger paint. You'll be sorry. All right, so the first thing I did was when this was wood before the urushi, is to get this to be a uniform thickness and width. See, I'm going to try to back up a little bit so you can see it's pretty uniform, and it fits the dimensions of the blade. There's no like bumps or anything here. And that brings me to the next point. If you don't already know by now, you probably do, that it's been my experience, the Japanese tend to do everything to the umpteenth extreme. There's no such thing as good enough, close enough. That's a Western American concept. Japanese tend to think like, well, it's done when it's perfect. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not in a huge rush. I don't think I have to be, so I'm trying to do it best I can and as perfect as possible. So what I did is I put one coat of urushi on, and then what I did is carved this out of buffalo horn, this piece here, to match this opening to the scabbard. See, it goes all the way through, and this piece of buffalo horn goes on, so the wooden part of the scabbard and the buffalo horn match up seamlessly. And you're probably wondering, well, how did you do that? Well, hours and hours of tedious fitting back and forth. Does it fit? No, it got caught up a little bit. Okay, let me shave a little bit off. Fit it? No, got caught up a little bit. Let me, with an X-Acto knife, shave a little bit off. See if it fits again. There's no way around this being a hard work, tedious project. That's what it is. It's going to be tedious, and it's going to be hours and hours of fitting things and making sure they're perfect, because the habaki for the blade fits perfectly in here, a little snugly, so you could still get it out with a thumb, but not really tight where you have to like wrench it out. And the topmost seppa of the sword fits this piece perfectly flat. It has to. So there's no way around it. So after I got this on and polished a little bit, mostly actually, most of the way polished, I did this wire wrapping. Now this is just what I wanted to do. It's a wire wrapping here, ended it here, so it's pretty seamless. You probably can't see the end of that. It's a 24 gauge brass wire, and I have a plan to patinate this a little bit, and we'll explore that in future videos. The next phase was taking this original kujiri, the end of the scabbard, this iron piece, from the previous scabbard, and using it on here. It did require some modification, making sure it was pretty tight. This is mostly a press fit. There's actually very little glue here, because I think I've alluded to this or said this in previous videos. Anything Japanese swords related, maybe cars related, is not meant to be fudged. It's meant to be done right. So take your time and do it right. This took a lot of adjusting too. This was a few hours of making sure everything fit. Because in here, if you'll notice, you have to fit the urushi in there so it takes up space without bubbling or leaking. So that is also hard to do. And by now, this is the third coat of urushi. I have another coat planned for today, and maybe another coat after that. Before, what I do is it's almost like we're finishing a car. Put coats of paint, sand. Not sand like sandpaper, really. I have this flat diamond abrasive tools. I'm very careful, and it'll almost look like a matte, and then polish, because I ideally want it to be a perfectly smooth mirror finish at the end. And then once that's done, I have clear urushi that I finish it in, a very thin coat of clear urushi. It's almost like a car clear coat, so it looks perfect. But first, before I applied the third coat, I again carved this out of buffalo horn, the kurikata, and I had the shitodame, a matching set of antique shitodame that I press fit into here. Again, this isn't really glued. I took hours of making sure everything was as perfect as I could get it before they were fit in. Now this is glued on, but it fit into there tight first, because you have to go really slow on all these steps. It's very slow and it's very precise. Again, close enough isn't good enough for this project. It's not. It's got to be on target, because I predict I have another at least few weeks left of making the saya, the scabbard, left to go. So it's got to be done very carefully, very precisely. And my next phase will be to, like I said, the fourth coat of urushi, smooth it out. I'm going to use powdered brass over it. I'm going to lacquer a design, sprinkle powdered brass over it, make sure that's flat. And then once that part's done, I'll do another video on like the full completed thing. And if you do work with urushi, another point I didn't bring up is it doesn't dry. It's not like regular paint. It cures in humidity. But, and ask me how I know, I've learned this the hard way. Don't think you can put it on and then cure it right away. What happens if you try that, if you put it on and you cure it immediately, it turns brown, in my experience. It turns like a milky brown. And you really can't get it back from that. Believe me, I tried. And that's when I said to myself, you know what? I guess I gotta have more patience with this. So what I do is I apply the urushi, and then I have this, I'll show you. It's a little stand on a clamp, right? Where I put this, and this is wrapped in tape. So it fits into there, into the scabbard throat, pretty snugly without damaging anything. It's not going to damage anything. So then this gets placed like this in my basement for at least 5 or 6 hours. And that allows the urushi to set a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll turn it the other way and let it set a little bit so I don't get these bubbles or waves going one way. And then, after about 8 or 9 hours have gone by, I'll run the water in the bathtub. What I'll do is I'll run the water in the bath. I get it steamy in there. Not crazy steamy. All it takes is a little steamy. Put it on the stand, put it in the tub, and let it be in there overnight with a little bit of humidity, and I'll find that in the morning it's ready to touch. So it's a slow, careful process, and it doesn't matter what time of year you do it. This is the winter time. It's been rather dry, so I have to use that method. I recommend that method anyway because even in the summer where it's more humid, if it's just sitting around inside, unless you live in like Brazil or something, it's probably not going to cure in that environment. It's not humid enough. And if you leave it outside, there's a chance it could rain on it, which is way too humid, and you're going to get some sort of, funky appearance, and you could end up ruining the inside of the scabbard too, or the metal fittings that you put on, or dissolving some sort of glue. So I don't recommend that either. This is why I recommend the method that I do that I just described to you. Sorry for all the rambling, but I feel like if I explain myself a little bit better, I could save y'all out there a lot of trouble in the future if you decide to do something like this yourself. So I guess that pretty much wraps up this part 2-ish. And any, comments, questions, put them in. I'll try to respond, and I'm going to work more on this, and I'll show you part 3 when I can. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.